Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation. I have the privilege of being the last one, so I have enough time to change completely what I plan to do. So bear with me with the thanks with the limit of the time and the limit of the richness of all the other people that has been speaking before with me. Let me. The first operation that I did was starting putting the S at the end of informality, which seems to me initially emerging from several reflections that we had today. Informality is not unique, it's definitely multiscalar, multidimensional, multi-geography, and has several implications. So the nature of its multiplicities is embedded into the conceptual reflection that we have. All the pictures that I decided to use today are coming from mainly two geographical references, India and Southeast Asia, namely Thailand and Cambodia, with a bit of Vietnam into. The reason is that in the recent 3 or 4 years, I was more working with a couple of networks that works called Asian Coalition Housing Rights and the Slum Dweller International, which are in reality an attempt at the socio-political level to construct and deconstruct a transformative change at the level of scale of the city. And they were so sort of successful to a certain extent to escape the scale of the city and goes beyond at the regional level. In that, that's the connection with the title. I'm in reality trying to open up a discussion on methodology, pedagogy in relation to informalities. And in opening up what are the challenge of methodology and pedagogy, especially for us, what I'm trying to question is, what is architecture? And when I'm using architecture, I'm using in a very broader sense in terms of design, planning at different scale. And in reality, what I'm trying to say is, can we still defend architecture, knowing all what we have been going through in the last couple of days? So the multiplicity of it, the multiscalarity of it, the capacity of looking at the several literature of it. I did try yesterday night, in reality, after a couple of beers, to sort of negotiate with my mind all the literature that I've read about informality. And I wasn't able actually to capture all the quotation that has been done before me. But I was trying in reality to map out with a very sketchy dimension that informality is not something new, of course, and has been moving in a very several reflection from sort of modern reflection, very local, very based, very located to needs and prescribing solution to informality, to something that has been in reality more transformative, more potential, more postmodern, if you want. So in a way, they're becoming a theory, and we're using informality as a theory to understand the city and its transformation. The other reflection that I'm doing is that what architecture is being subject to several reflections on its relevance. Are we still relevant to the debate of the city, and are we still relevant to the debate on the informality that informality poses at the level of urban intervention? And I mean, there are plenty of contemporary reflection on the relevance, the notion of activism, the notion of change, and so on. And again, yesterday night I did try to make another example, again after a couple of beers, so believe with the non-finite, definitive reflection of that, is I was like, okay, if I'm mapping out a sort of tension of architecture today, I can definitely come up with something intelligent to show the people tomorrow. That's my attempt. So what I did try to map out is sort of 4 position, mapping out the task and the role of architecture. I come up with a sort of general conventional market architecture, which is in a way is services. Is providing a service, and in a way is we have got a client and we try to have a sufficient client doing it. We still have a bunch of people that are trying to work at the utopian architecture reflection. Changing architecture is a discipline, protecting architecture as it is, and so in a way we are stuck in the status quo. Oh, we do have on the other side the resistant architecture. Architecture is something that do need to be infused with a continuous critical reflection. And critical reflection is dismantling its intellectual apparatuses. And on the other side is the opening up of architecture, of becoming social. And in a way, those tensions were opening and closing the design reflection. how much we design, how much we don't design, how much we gave to the people, how much we do, in a way, how much roof we built, if I'm using the metaphor that was brought before. This is a case that we have been working quite a lot, and some of the pictures that you're seeing is in reality Dharavi in Mumbai that has been quoted as a sort of very general and fundamental reference in terms of urban transformation that dismiss completely informality in its aesthetic, political, and social reflection. A big plan of erasure, a big plan of eviction, all terms that has been done. The point was designed potential to change the nature of the confrontation between state, market, and the people. If design has some role into that, do we need to dismantle design per se and just being able to introduce a completely different level of reflection? So I'm starting in reality with 4 presuppositions, and then I'm going to explaining more in detail few fundamental theoretical points that are going to infuse a methodological reflection that we are using. Not necessarily new, not necessarily fundamental, but at least the one that we are been developing in order to navigate the complexity of designing, not to do it, and informalities. The first 3 reflections are, is it possible to use and moving the reflection of informality towards something that is more contemporary, which is related to scarcity, or scarcities in reality, which is holistically reflection. It's an holistic reflection on accessibility, it's a holistic reflection on the possibility of resources, in a way, using Peter's term, the capital. But this position is, in reality, becoming unapologetically political because of the scale of the nature. Because of the nature of the pressure that all our cities are having in the inequality that is produced. Is it possible to develop then not a strong, thorough, thick architecture, but weak, a modest architecture, a minor architecture? Not to put it in a sort of subaltern position, but in an architecture that is not finite, is not definite, is incremental, is soft, and is not pretending to solve the problem. And there is a possibility to use an ethical architecture that, again, Heidegger has been used quite a lot, which is in reality rethinking on the poetics of dwelling, which is not the romanticization of the issue, and that is not the chance why I put this picture in there, this is one of the first attempts that Slum Dweller International back in 35 years ago was doing in relation to slum rehabilitation. So the big building that you saw in the pictures are in reality collective attempt to rehouse inside, in situ, slum dweller. The point was that this was done with a beautiful, incredible amount of capital reflection in terms of collectivities, in terms of political struggle, and so on, but the design was weak. The design was out of any reflection, and that transformative potential at the political level, at the social level, was reduced in terms of impact because design was refused to be part of the equation. So what I'm saying in reality is that trying to redefine this nexus, I don't know how to call it tensions or nexus. In reality, architecture and design cannot solve informalities, and informality are in reality challenging the reflection on architecture. And I'm trying to see 3 challenges. One is expanding the question on urban space in relation to social and political issues. Seems to me inevitable at the moment to deal with urban scale, which has the 2 components. The second one is getting away from a narrow definition and vision of architecture and urban design, which is a provision of solution. Architecture and design can shift their positionality in questioning the production of that spatiality and urbanism. And of course, dealing with precariousness and scarcity and informality as a de facto, a constituent material of everyday urban planetary condition is inevitable. Being in Lebanon, being in India, being in Italy, being in UK, that is a condition of production of our urbanism. And not confronting with it is meaning not having at a curricular level, not developing a methodology, implying not dealing with the privation. So the idea is it possible to embark in a sort of recalibration process, which is not finding a solution, but is a programmatic attempt to creative strategize in a specific time and space the transformative potential of any critical intervention at different scale? Is it possible to think the outcome of that rather than the product or the process? Are the dichotomy of the process and the product still sufficient to question architecture and design at the level of informality? Of course, I'm not going, because I have no time, the reference in terms of an intellectual, more theoretical apparatus are coming from those two people. One is Giorgio Agamben and the other one is Jacques Rancière. And both has been serving for sort of framing the intellectual sketches of that. The reason is simple. They both look at specific model of politics. They both look at aesthetics, in different terms, of course. They both did not discuss architecture per se, and so it was absolutely useful to having an external vision of it. And of course, they question what the sort of norm that has become pretty much in the last few debates, is that the state and the relationship between power, state, and its fascial manifestation are absolutely fundamental. Why am I interested, and I'm going mainly to question and sketch on Giorgio Agamben's reflection into that, is that Giorgio Agamben was fantastic, and I found it absolutely fundamental in thinking on a very concept that he put aside. We have been using much in the past couple of days, his notion of state of exception, if you want. I'm trying to move a bit from that and using more the notion of potentiality. And he says, absolutely interesting, that the essential character of poiesis, which is the creation and the production, is not an aspect as practical and voluntary process, but it's being a mode of unveiling and creating a truth. So in reality, the point is, do we still produce houses? Do we need to still produce a plaza? Do we need to produce a roof? Are the production something more complicated than that? So and interesting for him is that he used the notion of potentiality, something not that we are able to do, to speak, to think, or to design, but is our incapacity to do it. So in a way, if you transform that to a sort of more architectural and design reflection, is our architecture able to withhold, to not be displayed at its all complete form? And he says that to be free is to be capable of one own potentiality. So in a way, it's not a privation, it's not architecture to not be displayed, to not design, but it's to withhold that logic, to withhold that possibility. Several examples. One example that I'm trying to do, this is a squat area that we have been working in Rome, in Italy. And this is a building that has been completely occupied, really squatted by about 180 families. And this is in the pretty center of Rome, capital. But the same logic of impotentiality happened in a situation like that, where this is a river canal community, and this is absolutely interesting to know, is that river canal community in Bangkok. No land completely to be acquired. People got together, and they got together with three fundamental clear ingredients that are sort of ethical standing of the SDI process, which are savings, network, and collective use of land. So the crucial idea is people are getting together as individuals, and they are able to reproduce their own capacity at the level of scale. The network is going to be networked at the level of the city and at the level of the region. So each community in reality is happening, is working, is playing as a peer with other community, where knowledge, information, design capacity, and possibilities in reality are happening. The design stage in reality is the one that is left out, or left after. This is one of the, you see this side of the canal has been renovated, it's been reclaimed, it's been formalized, and the other side of the canal is still informal. What you can see in reality is that that piece of public walkway, which is a simple walkway, has been the trigger of all the reflection at the level of the community to start re-blocking, they call it, reorganizing an informal settlement. The reason for that walking was absolutely contentious, was not straightforward, and wasn't straightforward because of the density. because of the capacity of renegotiating in between the different people their own space and their own possibility. One interesting reflection about Rancière, if you want, is that Rancière works on a fundamental level, which is everybody is able to speak and everybody is able to hear. So in a way, there is a presupposition of equality. And I do think that on the work that we have been doing with community, and architecture has been complicit to a certain extent into that, has been unbalancing the complicity between the capacity of the people. So politics is generally seen as a set of procedures whereby the aggregation, the consent, and the collectivities is achieved, and where there is power distribution, role in the system, and legitimizing its distribution. So I'm going quickly on that. This is a public space, again, in one of the little community we have been working on. So how is possible to transfer that in sort of a methodological representation of a pedagogy for design? And we have been sketching, of course, a sort of pedagogy that goes around what we call it a design for dissensus. So a design that in reality is teasing apart reflection rather than providing a solution. And this goes around to 4 phases that are retrospection, which in reality are a sort of different way of calling mapping, what has been coming up in terms of mapping. But also is working on 2 levels. The one level is the possibilities that are already embedded into the site, the people, and their network. And of course, what is emerging as last moment is the alternative. And the alternative also is the activation of those potential. And what is interesting is that not necessarily this is a building, not necessarily this is a piece of architecture in reality. And so what is emerging is that those 4 phases are in reality allow the possibility to do a movement around several reflections. One is, of course, the non-designing. Non-designing the roof was more than not designing the roof. Was in reality the possibility to tease out, to take out the roof of the equation and making another process completely possible. Of course, the notion of research and design research remain absolutely fundamental. And that's why the multiplicity of discipline, the multidisciplinary reflection on informality are coming. And of course, critiquing in terms of creating an alternative and resisting. Of course, those are phases that are not completely finite. There's a continuous sort of itinerant into that. So it's not reinventing the wheel, but it's the idea of, is it possible to adapt a methodology that is, in a way, do not stay outside design and architecture. And how we do it that, and I'm very, very closing with few pictures, we're doing that in reality with 4 sort of activities. And of course, the position of the studio in reality, and yesterday experience was fantastic in seeing how the studio is still present in a sort of interesting dynamic. But is studio sufficient? Or do we, because of informality, we do need to have something else? And that's why we work more with this sort of more action research in the field and other reflection. And of course, I'm illustrating literally, just skip me through that, the phases. Of course, the mapping. And the mapping, as you said, is more than the visibility and programming the visibility into that, but is in reality the depiction of several reflections around of the social-spatial physicality, but moreover, in order to reach the scale, the actor and the people, the different stakeholders. So in a way, actor mapping become absolutely fundamental to be overlooked into the spatial mapping. That's what could be the possibility to reach the scale. Social-spatial profiling. We have been, of course, working very much with the different methodologies there are, but we have been working very much on 2 levels, mapping out social-spatial profiling in 3D, so through modeling, and with an insertion of narrative. So in a way, it's telling the stories of people, of places, and different narratives that are changing in a sort of 3D version with the multiplicity of that. Of course, in a protected studio environment. Of course, mapping and diagramming become fundamentally efficient in terms of communicating that. Then what is moving into the 4th stage is defining principle. How is possible to withhold architecture without immediately jumping to a design of an object, to a design of a process, if someone would have said. So we inserted the possibility of having principles around and guidelines that around would guide the further stages of development. And of course, we have been working on the last stage of design. It was collective design strategy that repositioned the collectivity of the analysis at the level of the site and the possibility of constructive intervention. What is interesting is that all this work is done not only with architects, with a sort of multiplicity of background. And this is going to be very interesting in stimulating the reflection on, is it possible to defend architecture, staying within architecture, criticizing architecture, but do not withdrawing too much from architecture and design. And with those pictures, I'm closing. Thank you very much.